So one thing I've noticed over the years and learned through a lot of hard experiences myself is this idea I have of categories or buckets that you can stick ideas into. A lot of times when there's conflict or even just lack of understanding in a conversation, it can actually be due not necessarily to disagreement per se, but actually the fact that the two different people that are part of the conversation have different number of buckets to put ideas into, and also the type of bucket may actually be completely different. An easy example would be if down here are a bunch of balls of different types, and I'm talking analogously, but in reality, if I had 10 or 15 balls and I had to sort them, I would sort them into categories that made sense to me, which are categories in my head. And so if I take all the balls and sort them by color, and I have buckets that are red, blue, green, then I that's if that's the or if those are the only buckets that I have available to me, then those are naturally going to be the buckets that I stick the balls into. So if everything is color coded and I stick the balls into the different colors, somebody watching who may not have color coded buckets, but may have buckets that are related to size, shape, or sports, might watch me take the balls and wonder why, especially if the buckets aren't labeled, which in conversations often they're not. You don't know what people are doing with the conversation and how they are processing what you're saying and then breaking it up and trying to sort what you mean. They're going to take what you say and put it into the buckets they have available to them. So this might be explicit, where I actually have some buckets labeled red, blue, green, and so someone can watch me and see, oh, he's sorting those by color. But in conversation, that's not necessarily going to be the case. You may not be saying, hey, this is how I am sorting and organizing what you're telling me. I'm putting that thing you just said into this particular bucket, which may be a different bucket than they would anticipate you putting it into. So therefore, that can lead to a lot of disharmony or even just lack of understanding. Um, so that's in conversation, but then also what I've learned over the years is when I'm listening to a lecture, listening or to an audiobook, a lot of times I don't have the same buckets that the speaker or author has. And so I find myself internally arguing with the things they're saying because I'm trying to sort what they're saying into the buckets. The best teachers are the ones that I most enjoy are the ones who actually give me a new bucket or category of buckets to put thoughts into. Um, and so when that happens, all of a sudden I grow in my ability to understand what people are saying, the speaker I'm listening to, if he'll identify the buckets for me early on in the conversation or in the teaching and explain, hey, you may be thinking in this way. This is how I'm thinking. These are the categories that I'm putting these things into. And if those categories are like a new set of thoughts for me, or a new set of categories, regardless of what the content of the lecture is, that is valuable because now I have more categories to sort things into. So I can take a larger volume and type of thought and more easily put it into different buckets. And then I'm more deciding which categories am I going to sort these into? How am I going to take it? And the best conversations that I personally have experienced are when there is a strata of the conversation that includes the category. So as we're talking, if I'm talking to somebody and it takes a certain amount of vulnerability and flexibility in the conversation, and even just intimacy, maybe a good friend, but not necessarily always. It could be somebody new who just automatically expresses things categorically and expresses what categories that they are working with, um, that can be a wonderful conversation where, uh, and it comes to Gracie and I, my wife and I have learned to objectively express how we're categorizing a situation, and that will come across in one particular type of situation where one of us will say, "This sounds critical, but it's not critical. We understand what we're talking about." I might be saying or doing something, and Gracie may say, "I am judging." So what she's revealing when she says, "I'm judging a particular thing," uh, I am judging that you are really tired and that's why you're doing what you're doing. She's expressing she's not just reacting to the situation mysteriously to me. She's first saying, here is why I'm about to say what I'm about to say because I'm judging this to be true. She's also acknowledging by saying that she is judging it to be true in a certain way, that she also acknowledges that that's just her perspective on it, but she's revealing her perspective and then engaging in the conversation on whatever the topic is she wants to bring up. So anyway, this is a new set of categories. Just the idea for me years ago was a new category, that there are categories, that there are things that people are automatically just dividing conversations and the content of conversations or lectures or teaching into. And if you only have a few, then you only have a few ways of understanding what you're hearing. And if the few that you have are very different than the person who's talking to you or that you're listening to in a lecture or a book that you're reading, if they have different categories, it's going to lead to, at the very least, a difficult read or a difficult listen. Um, so now, as I'm listening to someone talk, either in conversation or listening to a lecture, there's this layer to my observation and thinking that includes trying to understand what their categories, how are they categorizing things? How are they connecting things in what manner? And is it the same way that I connect things? And if it's not, how can I learn from them to connect things in a certain way? And then you have to decide, is that a good way of connecting? Do I agree with that? Do I think it's a wise or helpful way of connecting things or a helpful way of categorizing things? And that's a different thing that you can do. But first, I try and collect as many categories or formats of connecting things or ways of judging things, and I try and add that to my mental toolbox. So, hope that's helpful. It's something I think about. Maybe you can add that to your toolbox too.